Series 2012.
So in TASM, we have a new lead as Andrew Garfield. They came as the new Peter Parker. And a really new take was done on him as a character in general. Something that wasn't seen before. Perhaps it was a product of the decade it was in the 2010s.
Most definitely post Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Yes.
This new Peter was a little more edgy.
This was the era where every comic book movie had to be dark and edgy, like The Dark Knight. We saw it with Man of Steel. So this was kind of that era of... Which is kind of interesting because the Avengers came out this year too, and that's pretty much the complete opposite of like The Dark Knight and this Amazing Spider-Man movie. So, but
overall feelings on this movie, on the first Amazing Spider-Man movie?
It wasn't a bad movie, I'd say. It's still enjoyable. Good Spider-Man movie. Definitely a different take on the character. I like the focus on Gwen Stacy instead of Mary Jane. I thought it was different and newer. And then Emma Stone.
The chemistry was definitely a lot better.
Chemistry was
helped because they were together at the time. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. So
the focus on the mystery behind Peter Parker's parents. They added more story there.
I did not like that.
Yeah,
that was a element that me personally, I never really was interested in what happened to Peter Parker's parents, and if they were to ever explore that, I didn't like how centric it was to the plot of how he got these powers, and that this was a conspiracy all along, and like just stuff with his DNA mixed with the spiders, and it got a little messy and convoluted.
But what's your overall take, though?
I think this movie, it's got moments of greatness. I think for what Andrew Garfield's given, he wasn't the problem with this movie, but the way they went about Peter Parker, it's not, your everyday man that I think everyone can kind of relate to. He's, he's pretty cool in this movie.
He's a pretty cool kid.
And, I think the movie, it has its ups, it's got its downs, but overall, it's a very watchable movie. I don't hate it by any means, but I don't think it even holds a candle to that original trilogy.
It's interesting because rewatching these movies, I was not the biggest fan of this movie when it first came out, and rewatching it, I really don't hate it. I really don't even dislike it. I think it's a overall decent movie, and I think it was a solid foundation for a new series, especially if, in an alternate reality, this was connected to the MCU. I think it would have been a pretty decent start for the an MCU Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield, he's a great actor. I thought he was a great Spider-Man. He is a Spider-Man fan, which I think really helped. His relationship with Emma Stone, like we said, probably the best of all series. I think their relationship, which Mark Webb, he did 500 Days of Summer, so I think they really picked a good director for like the relationship side of Peter Parker, which is important to his character.
He's got a knack for those kinds of things.
Right. Some of the weaker aspects, the villain, Lizard, not terrible, but overall...
nowhere near as iconic as Spider-Man villains have the potential to be.
Right. He's just a little generic. He's just got a kind of a generic plan about turning people into lizards.
It's not quite
It's not the actor's fault. I thought the actor who portrayed Lizard did a really good job.
Fine, yeah.
And
again, we get the same as Doc Ock. You have that this is a role model for Peter Parker. It's somebody he looks up to, he wants to work for at Oscorp, right?
Yeah, he looked up to Connors, was kind of his role model.
Yeah, exactly. Then a teacher for him, and then again, it's a villain, someone who doesn't want to fight. He's trying to save him the entire movie.
And I think all those elements of the movie are pretty strong. I just going back to what's bogging it down is Dr. Connors. He's just got such a close connection to that storyline of who were Peter's parents and what was going on at Oscorp, to where anytime the movie, I think, had something really good going for itself, it always had to remind you about this subplot that I really didn't care about, to be honest.
Didn't care about,
Yeah, the parent stuff is the weakest aspect of this series. Other things I didn't care for. I don't care for the suit. I never cared for it. I just don't like the yellow eyes. I just never thought that worked for Spider-Man.
It felt obvious they were trying to differentiate themselves,
which
from
is fine.
Those movies.
In fact, I actually respect the suit in that aspect because it does differentiate the Andrew Garfield interpretation, and it does look like a suit that he would just make. Mm-hmm. I just don't like the yellow eyes. I never liked the yellow eyes. I wish they were white. It would have made a difference.
What about Peter Parker do you like? Because, I mean, in my personal take, with this iteration, I like that he's much more crafty and inventive. We know Peter Parker from Sam Raimi, we know he's intelligent. You know he's smart. You see him in his classes in the college. But this one, it shows him crafting, inventing, making the locks, making the web shooters. And I like that inventive side of him. It shows him how creative he is.
Yeah. Something that people say is, oh, well, this version of Spider-Man, he's a lot more jokey than Tobey Maguire's was too serious, which I, of course, disagree with. I think there's plenty of examples in the Raimi trilogy where Tobey Maguire did quip when it was appropriate, which is a flaw I have with the next movie. You know, Andrew Garfield, I don't really feel like he was that much more quippy than Tobey. He had one scene where he was very quippy, but other than that, I didn't really feel like he was that much more comedic compared to like Tobey's.
No. In that regard, they kept him. The jokes didn't overshadow his version of Spider-Man in this movie. At least, not to me. That's not a problem I have with this movie at all.
No.
Each one tries to set us up as part of it, and I think jokes is one of them. Characters is one of them. I like the focal point of him being in high school for both movies almost. He doesn't graduate until the second movie, whereas Peter Parker in Spider-Man 1, 2002, he graduated right in the beginning.
Yeah, things moved fast in that first Spider-Man
This
movie.
one is in high school the entire time. I kind of like that more high school setting.
You know, something I do love is Martin Sheen's Uncle Ben.
Oh, yeah.
Which, of course, I love Uncle Ben from the original trilogy, but Martin Sheen actually did a really good job as Uncle Ben. He really felt like a dad.
Martin Sheen.
He really did. I think it's kind of an underrated performance from this movie.
Uncle Ben from the Sam Raimi movies, obviously, he's iconic, but, Martin Sheen just brought something to it where, Uncle Ben in those original movies, he kind of felt more like a symbol or like an idea. This Uncle Ben, it felt like somebody that we've all known a guy like this in our lives.
We can relate to audience-wise.
He's very warm. Gives you a warm, fatherly feeling.
And I know people joke around a lot about, we're going to have to watch Uncle Ben die again, but actually, when he died in this movie, regardless of any of the other problems I have, I really do admit it hit. It was a really emotionally touching scene in the movie. You felt that loss alongside Peter Parker.
Well, and the ending of the movie when Peter plays the
voicemail.
The voicemail. I thought that was a great scene. Very emotional scene. A very emotional speech that kind of not really a speech, but the last message that Uncle Ben sent him. Thought that was great. I thought they did Uncle Ben really well. Other things they did really well, the CGI, something I don't really see a lot of people talk about. ILM, I'm pretty sure, did the CG for this movie. I thought looked like the fight in the school, the hallway. That is a completely CGI.
Very innovative. Very innovative.
It looked great. It still holds up today.
Putting him in a situation where, it seems like something where they thought, wouldn't that be cool if Spider-Man was fighting the Lizard in a chemistry classroom, and they just really opened up all the possibilities with the mixing of the chemicals.
Oh, I love that shot.
Just tearing down the lockers in the hallways, and Lizard using one of them as a weapon. It was pretty insane. Yeah.
Now they got creative with some of the action sequences, like the sewer. Of course, you got to have a sewer fight because he's a lizard.
Yeah.
The school fight was really cool. That shot of him mixing the chemicals and showing that Dr. Connor's he's still smart. Right?
Oh, yeah. Even as a lizard.
Yeah. I love that.
What about? Gwen Stacy, I think, needs to be talked about because she's such a different character compared to the Mary Jane that came before Kirsten Dunst.
And going back to what you said about Mary Jane and all three of those original movies, what differentiates Gwen Stacy from Mary Jane was in these movies she's not at all a damsel in distress.
No,
she is helping,
fighting to help him.
Just right alongside him, doing just as important things.
Mm-hmm. she's in the lab and getting the sample ready, trying to load it into the contraption, trying to make a reverse agent, I believe.
The antidote.
Yeah, the antidote, literally. She's doing a lot more. Whereas before it was just, Mary Jane, I gotta save you. I gotta save you. I gotta save it. Now it's Mary Jane, you have to leave, and she wants to help him.
Right.
Doesn't want to leave
I can
at
say
all.
that. You can say whatever you want about this series, but I think the relationship between Peter and Gwen, it's the best of all Spider-Man movies. I think their relationship was really well done. I think that was really the strong suit.
Emma Stone was great as Gwen Stacy, and even though we said that this isn't necessarily the Peter Parker that we want to see in these movies, but kind of going back on what we said with like Topher Grace and his incarnation of Eddie Brock, even though it wasn't super faithful to the comics, I still felt like Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, if there was no comic book material that came before and this was just our first introduction to the character, I still cared about this guy. I still thought he was entertaining to watch. I thought he had a lot of depth to him, and Andrew Garfield gave a great performance.
Right.
Yeah. Overall, not a bad movie.
No, I think, like I said, it's a decent flick. I really don't think it's a bad movie by any means. It's not my favorite. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either.
There's a lot worse comic book movies.
Yeah.